What we're going to go over next is how to graph one of these equations when it's in standard form. Make sure the equation is in standard form so that we can use this technique to graph this. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to find the X and Y-intercepts. That's the reason in the previous videos we went over how to find the X and Y-intercepts, and we're going to use those two things to help us graph this. So I'm going to rewrite it so that I can find both the X and the Y-intercept. So remember, if I need to find the X-intercept, I don't need the Y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark through that, and I'm going to look what I have left over. X is equal to -9. That means the X-intercept is -9. So I go to my graph, I'll find the X-axis, and on the X-axis, I graph -9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, -9. -9 is right there. Now I need to find the Y-intercept. If I'm going to find the Y-intercept, I don't need the X. I solve this little equation, divide both sides by -9, and I find that the Y-intercept for this one, negative divided by negative, is a positive 1. I'm going to graph a Y-intercept of +1. Y-intercept of +1 is right there. Then I take my ruler, and I have just used the X and Y-intercept to graph this line right here. If it's in standard form, simply try to use your X and Y-intercept to graph one of these. So let's try it again. I'm going to graph this equation that's in standard form, and I can tell it's in standard form because all the variables are on the left side. They're in alphabetical order. There's no fractions. First one's not negative. What I need to do is find the X and the Y-intercept for this. So I'm going to write it twice so I can find the X and the Y-intercept for this equation. To find the X-intercept, I don't need the Y. So I'm going to mark through this, and I'm going to solve this little equation here by dividing both sides by 3. The X-intercept is -24 divided by 3, -8. I'm going to find the Y-intercept. If I'm going to find the Y-intercept, I don't need the X. I'm going to solve this little equation right here, divide both sides by -4. The Y-intercept, negative divided by negative, is a positive. 24 divided by 4 is 6. So I've got my two pieces of information to graph this. I've got my X-intercept. My X-intercept is -8. So this is my X-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Put my first point there. My second point is going to be my Y-intercept. This is my Y-axis. I go to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I take my ruler and I draw my line. I just graph this line even though it was in standard form. And to graph something in standard form, I simply need to use the X and the Y-intercept. First thing I need to do is see what form it's in. If it's in slope-intercept form, I use different things than if it's in standard form. This right here is in standard form. All the variables are on the left side. They're in alphabetical order. There are no fractions, and this first one's not negative. That means I can use the X-intercept and the Y-intercept. I'm going to write the equation twice to help me figure out what the X and the Y-intercept is. I'm going to look for the X-intercept first. That means I don't need this Y. I solve this little equation right here. The X-intercept is -1. I need to find the Y-intercept. That means I don't need the X. And this one's already solved for me. The Y-intercept is -2. So I'm going to use these two pieces of information to graph this line. The X-intercept was -1. This is my X-axis. I go to -1 on the X-axis. I'm going to use the Y-intercept. The Y-intercept is where it runs into the Y-axis. I'm going to go down to -2. Use my ruler, draw my line. I just use the X and Y-intercept to graph this line. The X-intercept is where this line runs into the X-axis. The Y-intercept is where this line runs into the Y-axis. Example number 4. What form this is in dictates on how I'm going to graph it, what information I'm going to use to graph it. If it's in standard form, I can use the X and the Y-intercept. So let me check and see if it's in standard form. All the variables are on the left side. They're in alphabetical order. There are no fractions. The first one's not negative. This is in standard form. That means I can use the X-intercept and the Y-intercept. I'm going to rewrite this equation. That's going to help me figure out what the X and the Y-intercept are. First thing I'm going to find is the X-intercept. If I'm going to find the X-intercept, then I don't need anything associated with the Y. I solve this simple equation right here. Divide both sides by 5. The X-intercept is 7. I need to find the Y-intercept. If I'm looking for the Y-intercept, I don't need the X. I solve this equation. Divide both sides by -5. The Y-intercept is -7. So the first thing I'm going to graph is the X-intercept. X-intercept is 7. Here's the X-axis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's where that line is going to cross the X-axis. The X-intercept is 7. I put my first point at 7. Then I'm going to use the Y-intercept. The Y-intercept is -7. This is the Y-axis. So I'm going to look down the Y-axis and I'm going to count to -7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I use my ruler. Draw my line. I've used the X and Y-intercept to graph this. This line runs into the X-axis at 7. This line runs into the Y-axis at -7.